Florida's doing a similar thing, saying you can't discriminate against someone. You can't force them to do this, especially if they have religious exemptions. A judge in New York just upheld religious exemptions for healthcare workers. So legalese, right now, this is being decided in the high courts, and a lot of people are siding with you have a right not to comply with this mandate that they're trying to force on you. And this is something that's, imperative. This is something that's important. This is something that provides people liberties and freedoms that historically throughout life they never really had ever. And now they're finally given this ability that's slowly being eradicated, slowly being taken away from them. And people are saying, no, this is just absolutely ridiculous. This is over the top. This is draconian. This is totalitarian. And people trying to stand up against it are not using that same kind of force and energy. They're trying to stop a lot of that intrusion into our personal lives.
Yeah, we have the story from Gothamist, actually. Courts side with New York healthcare workers seeking religious exemptions, reject vaccine appeal by NYC teachers. They report that New York can't stop hospital and nursing home workers from seeking religious exemptions to the state's COVID-19 vaccine mandate, a federal judge ruled Tuesday. Requiring workers to get vaccinated without allowing such exemptions conflicts with long-standing federal protections for religious beliefs. Judge David Hurd of the U.S. District Court of the Northern District of New York wrote in his decision, the policy requiring all hospital, nursing home, and home care staff to get vaccinated against COVID was initially issued under Cuomo. We get the point. Point is, the law already exists and it's clear. You can't do that. It's not authoritarian when we fought long and hard, had elected representatives vote on something. That's literally a constitutional republic process. Joe Biden being like, nah, don't care. Cuomo being like, so what? Don't care. Cuomo, with the law on the book saying you couldn't do this, said, I hereby decree. That's authoritarianism.
Yeah, when you look at the implications of both of these policies, you clearly see one where we have government agents intruding into people's lives, punishing them, taking something away, and issuing fines for not going through another hoop that they literally made up. That hoop is a very important one. It's a very big one, and it has a lot of big implications, because if the government could do this, people could argue based on health policy, they could also do it to obese people and fat people because of the same kind of health guidelines for the greater good of everyone. The government
Bloomberg wants to.
Exactly. Centralized government arguing for the greater good of everyone. It's literally the recipe for disaster all throughout human history, and it's being repeated now by individuals saying, fighting back against it is futile. It's bad as well. It's not.
Do you guys think that vaccine mandates are unconstitutional across the board?
No.
What's an instance where it's not?
So there have been there are certain circumstances where I think vaccines can be mandated. But what you need to understand is that there's also a scale of acceptable risk. Meaning, if you've got an airborne Ebola with a 50% mortality rate, you're not going to have to worry about anything. People are going to be panicking and begging to be a part of the vaccination program. But we're dealing with COVID, which is serious, and long COVID is serious. And I don't know the exact percentages, but, we don't want people to get sick and die. At the same time, the rate for individuals healthy and under the age of 40 is substantially lower. So we're dealing with a nuanced political circumstance. That being said, there are some times, like in the military, for instance, they've mandated tons of vaccines. The difference here with COVID is that it's new. And, I talked about this quite a bit. When you join the military, when you're in basic training, they give you a whole bunch of vaccines. You can require certain vaccines for travel for certain work, right? So when I was traveling to like Venezuela and Egypt, yellow fever vaccination is a requirement because it was an insurance requirement. And this is different. This is the company saying, we're not firing you. We're just telling you, like, if you want to be the guy who gets to go to Venezuela, like, you got a yellow fever shot. And so I did. And I went to the doctor and he gave me the shot. And it was I think the yellow fever one hurt. No, it wasn't the yellow fever one. I don't know. One of them goes in your skin. It sucks.
Yeah,
that I understand.
Subcutaneous.
But if you're going to say a public accommodation, buying a sandwich with on a street that you are obligated to pay for, right? We all know how Luke feels about taxation.
I think it's just for employees. It's just for employees?
No, in New York, the mandates are you can't even go inside.
Same in Italy, yeah.
So that's the other thing too. Let's talk about employers. First of all, for a regular person, it shouldn't be allowed. But let's talk about healthcare workers seeking religious exemptions. These hospitals receive public funding. That's my understanding, right? They're on public streets. So you're telling me I have to pay for it, and then you're banning me from using it because of my religion? No, we already have a law saying you can't discriminate on the basis of religion. Now, there's reasonable exemptions to that. Like if you believe in sacrificing goats, they're not going to let you do it in public, like in the middle of the street.
And 50% Ebola death, then damn your religion and take it anyway.
See, the difference there is when we're dealing with issues of like viruses that aren't all identical, people have different expectations for the risks they're facing. With COVID, it is clear that there's a large percentage of people who don't believe the risk it warrants a sacrifice of such great loss of freedoms. When it came to the Civil War, people are like, Abraham Lincoln did a good thing, and in fighting the war, slavery needed to be ended. There's a great moral injustice. And so people need, I've talked about this before, that we all are trying to figure out where the line is and what we're willing to accept when we take certain actions. When it comes to an airborne Ebola, like people's insides are being liquefied, we're like, yo, we got to do something about this. And if you're looking at a 20% mortality rate and a vaccine that has like a 0.01% risk factor, most people are going to be like, I'll take it. But when you're dealing with, there's one report saying that the risk factor for a boy under 18, there's one study that came out saying the myocarditis was a higher percentage risk than getting COVID itself.
Some studies showing 8 times higher.
I don't know if that one study is good enough to say definitively. That's why I tell people go talk to a doctor and figure it out. Talk to someone who knows better.
Many doctors, yeah.
Right, and get second opinions. The point is, when it comes to issues of what we're willing to give up our freedoms for, there's some things I think most people recognize. If an alien invasion happened, man, there's a really tough question about what we need to do to rally everyone together to survive. If it's like, a series of crimes and it's in one city, why should the people of New York mandate everyone in the country lose their right to bear arms because of the crimes in their city? And that's basically what's happening.
I think what's happening also is that there's a segment of people that are like, hey, COVID, we look at the numbers, it doesn't look that dangerous as what people are making it out to be. So this seems like it's unconstitutional. You've gone too far. But then there's other people that won't leave their house because they're afraid for their life. And so for Abbott to tell everyone in Texas, you can't mandate it, even though they might feel like afraid for their life, is where I was like, well, there's the authoritarian flag. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying.
But I think you bring up a good point. I think regardless of whether or not there's a severity to the disease, no one should have to give up their freedom for someone else's fear. And that means even if there is an airborne Ebola, you can choose to go get vaccinated for it. And other people who don't, well, then that's their issue, I suppose. And we should be operating on a more, liberty-minded and personal response. We need personal responsibility and liberty, even in the face of something like an airborne Ebola. Look, man, if there was an airborne Ebola, 50% mortality, people's insides were liquefying, I would go to the mountains. Like, I'm not going to go anywhere near
I don't
a
even think
city.
that'll help you escape those kind of things. If you ever watch The Stand, you would know.
Sure.
It's a movie.
In this instance, the risk is there. We don't, people who are over 40 with COVID, people over 40 are at higher risk.
People that are obese.
People who are
let's
obese.
talk real talk here for a
hospitalizations.
second. Yeah.
So what do? Do we just destroy everything? I mean, the economy's in shambles. People are going hungry. People around the world are starving. We're seeing massive ripple effects. It's affecting everything. Unless people want a great reset, I think at a certain point you need to recognize that we need to strip. Look, ultimately, I'll say it like this. You know what? I do not support the vaccine mandates. However, if there were a legislative body that voted and there were long-term studies and then specific exemptions, I'd be like, okay, well, it was done through an electoral process. Having governors and the president just declare by edict, I'm like, no way. I'm absolutely not. When we talk about, vaccines like for MMR at schools and stuff, I'm like, yeah, but these are vaccines that have been around, researched for decades. They've been around for even longer than that. A lot of these vaccines went through very serious and rigorous studies over seriously 20 to 30 years. Now, when it comes to the COVID vaccine, Operation Warp Speed, it's one of the fastest projects ever done. I don't think, personally, a lot of people think that there's the vaccine is dangerous. I don't think that. And I think ultimately my opinion is irrelevant because I'm not a doctor. I just think people's medical choices are their own. If people have a sincere medical, religious belief, like imagine if de Blasio said you have to eat bacon. Like everybody must eat bacon right now. Like you'd have a whole lot of religious people being up in arms like you can't do that. So there's a similar thing there. I'll tell you this though. It is a fair point absolutely to say the lines between what we're willing to accept are different for everybody. And there are some people who are staunchly libertarian. And even if there was an airborne zombie virus would be like, you cannot force me to do anything no matter what. And there would be other people who were like seemingly libertarian before now being like, at this point, lock everyone in their houses. So I think everybody has their line. how much risk you're willing to
It
assume.
is. It's a gradient scale, and to make laws as a white or a black or a yes or a no or a 1 or a 0, that's tough.
It
However,
should be a personal decision.
but when it comes to what Abbott is saying, like I thought about this, and I've said this before. I'm like, I don't like the idea that DeSantis was like nobody can mandate masks, and I'm like, well, that should go through the legislature, right? However, masks are different from the vaccine thing. The mask thing I think is interesting. If somebody wants to require a mask in their store, like, what's your justification for saying they can't require shirts, or they can require shirts? Vaccine's different. It's an irreversible medical procedure. And there are people with medical issues over the fetal cell use, and there are people with with religious issues over the fetal cell use and medical issues that
I take
you
religious.
can't force it.
I have religious problems with it personally. It violates everything I hold dear to my spirit. I will not touch it. I would never in a million years feel right taking a rushed vaccine with the evidence I have, and that is a religion. That is my true belief in what I am. I never defined my religion, but that's how it feels.
So let's put it this
Your
way.
conscience, yeah.
Do you think that you have a right to public accommodation in the Commons?
No.
You don't think so?
Oh, in the Commons? I mean, yeah. Through my tax dollars, yeah.
Right. So do you think then Abbott saying, guys, this guy's paying taxes, you can't kick him out? Is that authoritarianism?
Yeah,
It's not, bro.
Because if I start violating their semblance of normality, and then he's like, you still can't get rid of him.
But this is something you pay for with your taxes.
Yeah.
For them to tell you that you have no access to these spaces would be them stealing from you.
I guess I get access, but it's up to me to maintain dignity to stay there. Like if I pull my pants down, then
Right.
So then I would say this. The question that I have about the vaccine mandate is, if they're going to say, well, you have to have a vaccine mandate, why don't them come along and say, okay, a vaccine or a negative COVID test? And it's the lack of or a negative COVID test that knocks it out for me. Because if you said or a negative COVID test, that would mean that the mandate was really about COVID. The fact that there's no or a negative COVID test means they're just wanting everyone to be vaccinated come hell or high water. So, again, this leaves us in the absurd scenario where someone who has COVID but is vaccinated can go into a restaurant and breathe as much as they want, and someone who can prove that they don't have COVID is kicked out.
Right.
That's the absurdity that the vax mandates and the vax passport, that's what gets me. If you can say, or, I mean, where I live, it's of you have to show proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. And the antigen COVID tests are going for like $200 a pop because people want them. But that you can do that. You can say
it's still there's still a problem there in that what they're mandating at some universities like every 3 days.
oh
Who's got the time
no.
to go and do that and spend that money?
Not a college
So then
student.
people just go, fine, screw it, I'll do whatever you say, and that's the problem. So that's a good moral conundrum, though. The Ebola thing, like what everyone's rights are be damned if the virus is severe enough, perhaps. And then the issue is, you're right. The Democrats are terrified. They're shaking. And then they really are. We look at the polls. Look at what happened when we invited Hassan Piker on the show, and he was like, "I'm totally down. I'll do it." And then he was like, "Yo, I'm kind of worried about COVID." We have people here all the time who are kind of like, well, we wash our hands, we use hand sanitizer, we take precautions, we clean everything, and we're actually, I think we're actually socially distanced right now.
We are. Yeah, I
we're
think
probably
so.
properly socially distanced at this
That's
table.
right.
And but we have to live our lives, man.
Yeah.
So no disrespect to Hassan, he's genuinely concerned about this, but his concern is several orders of magnitude more than ours. You know what I mean? So then if he's going to vote for what he wants, lockdowns, and we're going to refuse that, I don't know. Maybe the real simple solution is if you're scared, you stay home.
The beauty of the United States is that each state is an experiment, and this is an opportunity to watch it happen in Texas and see if maybe I'm misusing authoritarianism. I know it's not an extreme authoritative thing what he did, but this is an opportunity to see if what he's doing works.
I mean, the experiment was there in Sweden. It was there in Florida. It was there in many places around the world that said we're not going to be playing ball. There's a lot of other experiments right now happening in places like Norway. Just released a lot of their restrictions, their lockdowns, their mandates, masks, all of that. Their case numbers went down. So there's so many examples of experiments. I always said from the beginning of this, Sweden's going to be the true test of this. Because if you remember, they were saying that Sweden's going to end up in a bloodbath. There's going to be bodies stacking on top of bodies. There's going to be a massacre of unprecedented proportions. Everyone's going to die in Sweden because somehow Sweden's not following along with the programming. They're not going along with what they're told to do by the World Economic Forum, by the World Health Organization, by a lot of these, quote, experts. And look what happened to Sweden. Look at their numbers. Compare their numbers to the states that locked down the most. Compare their numbers to Israel and Singapore, and you will truly have your eyes opened wide by the disparity of numbers.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.